All right. I am here with Wendy Diamond, and she is the CEO and founder at LDP Ventures. How's it going, Wendy?
Woohoo! Great, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to really get into your background and your successes and everything here. But before we kind of get to the nitty gritty, let's start with where you started and how you kind of got to where you are.
Okay. I'm from a small town in Ohio called Chagrin Falls, Ohio, 2,500 people growing up. And that was where I grew up, a small town, Midwest. And I ended up going to school in Boston that was a small all women's college for 300 women, literally only 300 women. And going there was like the changing point of my entire life because growing up in Ohio, I only thought, like, wow, I want to live here for the rest of my life, right? And going there, it opened up my mind because I went to college with girls from all over the world. And that just opened up my eyes to the global economy, right, and the global world. And after college, I sent 100 resumes out, and no one hired me. Literally, no one hired me. I didn't realize you had to like talk to your alumni and like do all this networking stuff, right? And at that time, people didn't even talk about that, right? And so that led me to realizing I had to be. I don't even know if that word entrepreneur was like really a word, like a prominent word at that time, actually. And I literally like just realized I had to start my own business. And so right after college, I was an entrepreneur. I ended up living in Turkey. And while I was living in Turkey, I decided to start a business where I would buy old stock from all these factories that were manufacturing designer clothing and stuff like that. And we shipped it to Russia in 20-foot containers, SGS inspected. At 22 years old, I was doing all this wheeling and dealing, not really knowing what I was doing, but because I love puzzles, I love life, I love learning. I am very much an experiential person versus educational. Like, I really had a hard time in school to focus on things I didn't love. And I think just getting that bug at a really young age to like really want to like be my own boss and do what I wanted to do and learn and grow. That was what enabled me to do that. So I did that for a couple years, did pretty well. I then moved to New York after I realized you could take a girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl because I was like in Russia at this crazy period of time, right? And traveling the world and not, getting into funny circumstances and things like that. That led me to just realize, wow, I, really want to go back to America. And I really, you could take a girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. I'm still from the Midwest. And so I ended up going to New York City. And in New York City, I ended up volunteering for the Coalition for the Homeless when I got there. And that was where I was feeding like 1,000 people a week, a ham sandwich, an apple, a cold milk. And I realized, like, wow, I feel better doing this than what I was doing in Europe and in Russia and the whole thing. That making an impact was really what I loved to do more. So I went on a journey from there, and after volunteering for 6 months, feeding 1,000 people a week, these homeless people, these little ham sandwiches, milk and apple, I realized I wanted to help homeless people. So I did 2 cookbooks with all the celebrities and raised $500,000 for the homeless, emptied the shelters and Coalition for the Homeless New York. And I literally from that just realized, wow, I feel great doing this. I was so excited. And I didn't really, when people ask me, like, how did you get all these big celebrities? Like, because we got like Madonna, Michael Jordan, all these people. I just was telling everybody what I was passionate about. And I was so passionate about helping homeless people, right? And that's how I was able to create those. I was on Oprah, Howard Stern, People Magazine, and then I ended up. I was in New York City. I was done with that project. I ended up. I grew up with animals, and in my life, animals were the most important. Growing up in a kind of, you know, funky family, I realized like the animals were the only thing in my life that was stable, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna go adopt a dog, at the AKC, which is the city shelter of New York. I ended up adopting a purebred Russian blue cat and a purebred Maltese. And that made me realize, like doing some research, that 12 million animals were euthanized a year. And nobody at this time were talking about adoption or rescue. So that led me to creating and launching, because I knew a media company to bring celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world. Because I knew if everyone knew you could adopt any breed, any size, any age, you could adopt versus buy, right? And we could bring that number down, right? Because I know everyone wants to help in this world. You just got to make it really easy for them, right? And so that's led. I created the first media company to bring celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world. 10 books out, 5 TV shows. I created the word Yappy Hour that's now used all over the world. I created the first ever pet fashion show in history. We had a primetime show on CBS. I was on the Today Show every month, raising millions of dollars for animal rescue. And that led me to getting a stalker, literally, that changed my entire life. And that's when I decided to kind of step away from the public life. And I ended up being able to take care of my father at the end of his life. And I made a commitment to myself when he passed away that I would go to 2 new countries a year. And that's where I ended up in Honduras, which was the murder capital of the world. I didn't know it was the murder capital of the world. And that was 2013, by the way. And in 2013, when I ended up there, I ended up volunteering for an organization that gives microloans to poor women, right? And at that time, it was like you couldn't go anywhere. So the owner of the hotel was like, I know this development director of this organization called Adelante. Why don't you go check it out? So I did go on that journey where I learned all about the statistics of women in business. At that time in history, 1% of venture dollars went toward women founders. These women receiving these microloans were getting them at a 98% rate. 90% went to educate their children, provide for their families. When women are empowered in business, they have self-confidence, dignity. They don't allow human rights violations. So that was the journey that I ended up supposed to spend a couple hours. I spent 3 days on a dirt floor, met with all the women entrepreneurs. And I was like, wow, when I came back to New York, I realized, wow, 388 million women and girls are living in poverty. 1 out of 8 women in America live in poverty. Nobody, literally no companies, no governments were talking about women entrepreneurs or women in business. It was very little out there. So that was when I decided to create an official day in the world in 2013 called Women's Entrepreneurship Day. Because I knew if we created a day, we would create the conversation. So we partnered with the State Department of the United States, and we launched at the United Nations. And that's where we now are celebrated in 100 countries. And our whole goal is to bring governments, business leaders, civil society, entrepreneurs, investors together to collaborate to find solutions to economically empower women from the ground up approaches to start their entrepreneurial journeys, but also to support women entrepreneurs around the world.
Cool. Very cool. So a lot of kind of social entrepreneurship themes in your background here, where you find something that you believe is wrong, and you kind of really did a great job articulating changing the message around, like, the 12 million figure of the pets getting or animals getting euthanized. And I think that is a great example of social entrepreneurship, like rephrasing and changing the message into like a positive way of saying you can adopt versus buy is such a good, simple kind of reframe. And I like that of how you've approached that. So when it comes to kind of getting into the nitty gritty here with preparing a business, let's say it's a nonprofit or somebody that's listening to this, it's a social entrepreneur. The show's really focusing on exiting companies. So what have you seen over the course of your career with preparing a business, or people that are preparing for an exit when they're doing something like a social entrepreneurship venture?
Yeah, well, it's really kind of interesting, right? Because I never did anything, So with Animal Fair, all I focused on was helping the local animal rescue groups that had no money, no marketing, right? I didn't work with the big organizations like the ASPCA or North Shore or Humane Society of the United States. So I was never sustainable, right? And so in the same thing with Women's Entrepreneurship Day, I always wanted to help the most impoverished. But what I realized doing this, the more you give in life, the more you get. So, because of creating this foundation, I really learned about investing really in 2013. And that's when I just decided to start investing in women entrepreneurs and funds and Luckily enough, I met a goat farmer in Botswana that taught me about Bitcoin, so I got in early there, and just really open, because I think what really is important, whether you're an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, you started your own company, is you've got to be open, and you really need to embrace the future and innovation, right? And so, a lot of what I've seen investing in a lot of founders, like I have, I've done really well with some, but I have lost a fortune with some, right?
Hmm.
And when you're investing, you need, at the beginning, especially at a startup, you've got to invest, you're investing in the people,
Hmm.
right? And you need to know everything about those people, because you know what? It's really an idea until you get your you go to market and you get sales and etc, right? So I would say, one of the things, that I really look for when I'm investing is just really high integrity founders,
Hmm.
right? That really are so passionate, because I'm a passionate person. I'm a Virgo, super passionate. And so, like, passion, they have to have that passion, that whether, and they have to really be able to pivot, because nothing goes the way you want it to go.
Hmm.
Nothing ever. I mean, very few, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe AI companies, I don't know. And so, nothing ever. And you need to know how to pivot. You need to really, be able to take all the, advice you're getting from people and make the right decisions, right? You need to be respectful of everyone you deal with, get back to people, because at the beginning of your journey, it's about embracing everything so that you can figure out where you're going to go,
Hmm.
right? And so one of the things, would you like me to give you an example?
Sure. Yeah. I like that
I'll
you.
give you a great example, actually. All right, so like one of the people I invested in was, her name was Anna Skaya with a company called Basepaws, right? It was the 23andMe for pets. She
Hmm.
just got off Shark Tank. She was a woman founder, right? Nobody, it was hard. And this was like in 2000, I think 17 maybe, or 18. And it was hard for her because like no one was investing in women at that time, right? And so, she was so diligent. She had an amazing data room. She immediately responded to people. She had, and respectfully, like, here's my calendar, no back and forth where they had to figure out a time. Just really taking the advice of, I was saying to her, listen, everyone wants to help. You just got to make it easy for them,
Hmm.
right? So just quickly give them a calendar, right? And then make sure you look at who they are before you even talk to them, to see, hey, if you're doing Basepaws, do they have a pet? You know what I mean? How can you make it so they see that you're doing this because you want to help them? And what I loved about her company was the purpose. The purpose was she was helping pets live longer and healthier lives by literally selling the data to the health food companies and the pet food companies to help them create better health care and better food for your pets to help them live longer and healthier lives, right? So that meant a lot to me because I would love my pets to live forever, right? Because they're like my children. And so it was like she asked for help, and I literally put her with my network. I ended up becoming also an advisor to her company, and I literally introduced her like to 100 people, and she got the investment. And because she was just so focused, like uber focused on making this company work, she ended up was going she closed her seed round. She was going, and we got all these women, amazing women, funders, that helped fund her, not all
Hmm.
women, but fund her in a lot of great angel groups. And she ended up getting acquired by Zoetis.
Hmm.
I think it was like 40x, right? And she now is, advising Zoetis on innovation, right, in the pet space. So I think, looking at that is really important. I also invested in a company. It was on Shark Tank. She was on Shark Tank, another Shark Tank company. And that one was the biggest flop because I really didn't know the founder. The
Hmm.
founder partied, you never knew where he went after you have a business dinner, who the heck knows what happened. And, I remember having dinner with Mark Cuban, and I said, hey, Mark, we both invested in this company too. And he was like, that guy should be in prison. I'm like, I know. And so it's like, people can be great salespeople, but really what's important is to know where they live, who they're living with, what are
Right.
they doing, right? Because it's important when you're investing in startups to do that.
Yeah. Agreed. I like that you kind of went through the process of preparing is truly identifying the right entrepreneur on the investment side. Like you got to make sure that they are going to be able to pivot and be open-minded, because you mentioned that early on, is that if you're not open-minded, you're going to close. You're
Yeah,
going to
I
close.
love
If
like
you're
you know,
not
like when
open,
you
you're
have
going to
that
close.
spirit of like you can never lose your inner child, right?
Yeah.
Like why, where, how, right?
Hmm.
Because that those are the people that are, and just definitely I just like believe in purpose, right? Like people talk about mental health issues. I said if everyone could just have a little bit of purpose, go walk a dog at a shelter, do things that, are really going to make you feel better, right?
Hmm.
And so that's, one of the things I think about when, going into companies or like, we invest in a lot of funds as well, is, are they really so passionate about what they're investing in,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And how are they with their founders, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the sort of passion on both sides is super important. And for people listening to this that are either on the investment side or the entrepreneur side, you know, having a good mix there is pretty key. Like knowing that the investor is passionate and interested in the problem. Like the entrepreneur you just described was perfect for your background, everything, and you could get behind it with
Right.
the 23andMe for pets. Like it just aligned, the stars aligned there perfectly for you to introduce her to a bunch of people, and for her, she gets to bounce ideas off of you, and you can kind of follow on the journey. So that's a great example of the stars really lining up perfectly
Hmm.
for a good investor entrepreneur relationship. I really like that example. So with women run businesses specifically, let's talk about like some of the hurdles or the mistakes that you've seen kind of be made, or hurdles that have happened specifically for women listening, that maybe they could avoid, or things that could come up when it comes to preparing a business to exit.
Well, I think first of all, you'd rather have something huge, right? A little of something huge than a lot of nothing.
Hmm.
So make sure, at the beginning you bring on, a team that's going to be behind you, right? Get your, high quality advisors that that are going to support you. Bring on a team that's really going to support you because that's a big part of this, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a lonely journey, right? And I think that's key. When I see these things, I'm like, wow, kind of like what we were discussing earlier, for instance, Anna with Basepaws, she had an amazing team behind her, really people in every sector, right, that would support her. And she gave them equity and the whole thing. Um, I also think, when, people are starting their business, especially whether it's a man or a woman, when you get the opportunity to speak to people, do not just talk about yourself. Do not just talk about, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and the next thing the time's up and you don't even know one thing about the other person or never said anything. So, what really I think people need to learn about is collaboration.
Hmm.
Collaboration. What does that mean? Both people benefit. So always be, think about that when you're talking to people. How can you contribute to their life, right? How can you make their life a little better as well?
Hmm.
Because if they're giving you advice or you're asking them for advice or money or whatever that might be, there's nothing more when I get these calls and I'm just like, wow, I've just learned all about their business. The time's up. They didn't even ask like, how are you? Or, what are you working on that's fun? Or how can I help you? Right.
Hmm.
And I think, what I've learned in life, I really just want to be with people. Anyway, so I just think, it's just super important to have, really high integrity, make sure collaboration, please, when you're asking people for help, make sure you make it where you can also help them because everyone is an expert at something. They can always contribute to something, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's also important. I think thinking about exiting, you know, yeah, we all as investors want an exit and we all want a profit, right? We're a capitalist society, give a hand up, not a hand out. I totally am into it. I just think, I would rather see you create a successful business because the exit will come, right? So just focus on your business and making it happen. I don't want to hear, like, oh, we're going to make all this money. I want to hear like whatever you're solving. Another company I'm in, I invested in a 73-year-old woman, right? We all talk about these young entrepreneurs. Well, this woman has more energy than you and me, Steve. I'm telling you, she's amazing. And I'll never forget. I saw her pitch. I was like, wow. And she literally was a patent attorney at Morrison Forster for 35 years. She married her client who took 3 health companies public, including Myriad Genetics for breast cancer. And it's a public company on NASDAQ worth billions of dollars. And she created the visible light to prevent any infection in catheters and dialysis. She solved the 3rd largest death rate in the world, right? Infections. And, I look at what, I've never seen a better data room. I've never seen someone more passionate, because she's going to, this technology is going to save millions of lives. It's going to save hospitals billions of dollars. It's called Lightline Medical. And when I look at this founder, it's like, people, I call her seasoned entrepreneur, right? Because it's important for us to literally invest in, for me personally and our family, to invest in super high integrity founders that are truly going to make a positive imprint in this world.
Super cool. Super cool.
So the concept around mistakes, I always like to discuss this, whether it's around evaluation or things that you've seen on the investment side and the entrepreneur side. What's kind of a common mistake so people that are listening can kind of identify the mistakes that you've seen and maybe try to avoid them?
It's always people, right? It's always like, investing in the wrong people would be a mistake, right? But you never, and that's why personally, we don't invest in anybody we haven't met, that we don't know, that we don't get references from. It's very easy to get references, right? Who also would, you can ask other people that invested in the fund, can I speak with you about it? What was your due diligence, and as well as, if you're investing directly. So I think it's really people, and I think it's also, not everyone's meant to work together. Not everyone's meant to be friends together. Not everyone's meant to get married together, right? Once you find the right people, it works.
I like that. I like that. I think one of my favorite parts about the entrepreneurial journey is that the team, without a proper team, you literally can't accomplish anything. It's remarkable. So those first hires are crucial, because on a small, call it 10-person team, you're subject to a lot of criticism and critique from not only the outside world, but investors and everything. So you got to have people in your corner that are, they're for the long haul, and they're in it. So that kind of takes us to the finale here of knowing what you know now. What would you tell Wendy 10 years ago?
Enjoy the journey, right? It's like everything we go through is a positive, whether you know it in a day, in a year, or a decade, right? Enjoy the journey. It's not about, it's really when people look at their success in life, they're not like, oh my God, I love it, I'm now living a high life. It's more about like, oh my God, I loved that journey. And it's all about the good, the bad, the ugly, right? It's all about experiencing everything and realizing everything we go through in life was meant to be. And just enjoy the journey, but don't ever give up.
I like that. I like that. Well said. And most 99.9% of the people that I talk to, the moment that they go through an exit, it's like an abrupt, just mental brick wall where they're like, okay, I got this lump sum, what's next? I need to figure out something next, because the characteristic of someone who gets to that point can't just stop. It just doesn't happen. So I think it's well said. The journey is super important. So that takes us to what you're working on now, and where can people learn more?
So we're here now, joinwedo.org. If you go to joinwedo.org, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur, we have all the greatest women investors. So if you're looking for funding or anything to do with AI or anything, we have the whole startup section on our website for female entrepreneurs. That's all for free. We launched a program to teach 1 million impoverished, disadvantaged women and girls around the world AI and decentralization and everything. And these are free tools. They go through through the program and they're taught by the most successful people in the world. And we've made it super easy, whether you're 10 years old in Zimbabwe or 80 years old at a senior citizen home in Iowa. We've made it so easy that everybody can get through this and do it with all the free tools. So it's literally super easy, so we can enable everyone in this world to be part of the future. And we help incarcerated women in prison go through an entrepreneurship program. There's so many like really fun things. You can go through our impact section. And what's fun? I finished a rom-com, so I'm doing a fun rom-com which is based on my life called Mr. Right Breed, and it's based on my book How to Understand Men Through Their Dogs. So I'm having fun with that and going through that journey too.
Very nice, very nice. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Wendy mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Wendy.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me.